Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 10th of July, comes to you from London. And the dollar is holding its ground, waiting for the Fed Reserve Powell's chairman's comments to Congress today, and everyone will be eagerly looking for a heads up as to which way he thinks rates might go. The markets recently priced in a fall in rates in July, having been pricing in rises in rates, but that seems to have just gone off the agenda a bit lately, and the dollar is reflecting that. Looking at the euro dollar, of course, this is the chart inverted in terms of dollar performance. We see the euro is just teetering along the bottom here, still looking pretty bearish. And if we look at the dollar against the yen normally the safe haven. Dollar is looking pretty strong here, so that's a good heads up as to what we might expect. Sterling sinking to new two-year lows yesterday. We talked about that in yesterday's charts today, and interestingly, we're now looking at the low levels that we saw in 2017. 120 is certainly a support level that we will be looking at keenly. We've got targets to 123 on the medium-term chart. We've got parity on the longer-term chart, and we're just short of downside targets on the short-term chart, although this thrust will give us a downside chart. If you're trading the currencies, take a look at the 1 minute point and figure charts throughout the day to see for any new targets being generated. Against the euro, we see sterling at 111, and that's a pretty critical level. Again, if we break through that 111, 110, so again, we're just seeing sterling really falling to new lows. And against the Swiss franc, we're sitting below this 124 level, 123.59, and downside potential here of about 1.5% further. Looking at Bitcoin, we're holding that $12,500 level, 12,800, and we are looking like we're getting ready for another run here. Quite interesting, the sort of pause for breath and then pushing to higher. So we're not broken out yet. We've got good upside targets on the medium and long-term charts. The short-term chart, not so clear. Again, look at the 1 minute point and figure charts for the very short-term picture throughout the day. The S&P 500 index was down 1/3%. Markets looking for an interest rate cut, but the spectre of that slowly unwinding, and that's just having a little bit of a performance effect. And the trade wars, of course, still dragging on. Looking at the Nasdaq, it struggled again yesterday, and the Dow was down 0.5%, just struggling to really break out convincingly to new highs. The Russell 2000 index, the broader based index, also struggling yesterday. The futures this morning, the S&P future down 0.25%, the Nasdaq E-mini down just over 0.25%. So it does look like US markets will open lower again today. As I say, all eyes will be on the Federal Reserve Chairman. Looking at the UK market, we see here we're down slightly this morning, and the mid caps also down slightly. So just a bit of a hangover for equities at the moment. We're really waiting for a new direction in the market. The DAX is down, also just starting to break into short-term bearish territory, and the CAC 40 also down just over 0.1% this morning. Japan was down 0.25% overnight. The Hang Seng is actually up 1/3%, but doesn't really change the outlook on the chart. Still looking in bearish territory. Asian equities looking quite vulnerable to a stronger dollar at the moment, and the Chinese market continues to lurch lower. It's down another 0.5%. India also down 0.5%, so we're in bearish territory here in the short term, but the medium and long term charts still looking pretty good. And the Aussie market actually bucked the trend. It was up 1/3%, and is one of the better looking stock markets at the moment. Brent crude sitting at 64.94, so we're nudging the $65 level. We're up over 1% this morning. Short-term bullish. We've got a few upside targets here on the short-term chart. We are still hitting medium and long-term bearishness, and WTI is actually up 1.6% this morning. So that's looking pretty good on the short-term chart. US nat gas sitting at 2.4%. Sorry, $2.42. So that's had a bit of a jump. And just holding that level in the 240s is quite interesting. Gold sitting at 1392, So just struggling to get back above that 1400 level, and silver also just looking a bit short-term bearish. US 10-year yields, this is the really key for today. US 10 yields sitting at 2.1%, so 2.10, and that is the highest we've been for a little while actually, probably a good few weeks. And so the market is starting to think that the Fed won't lower rates, and so we're seeing the yield in the 10-year curve just looking a bit stronger. Taking a look now at the individual stocks, this data coming to you from Yahoo Finance. We take a quick look at the world indices. We see mostly red here. There were a few Asian markets that bucked the trend, and South American markets also, but on the whole, we're bearish. Looking at the Dow, first of all, Goldman Sachs were the best performer yesterday, again up 1%. Not enough to change the position of the chart to bullish. Boeing continued to surprise to the upside given the amount of negative news that they've been receiving, and we're just holding the long-term bull trend there. The worst performer yesterday was 3M, and so we're seeing here they were actually down 2%, so quite key there. The Nasdaq 100, if we look to the Nasdaq 100, we see here the best performer was AMD Micro Devices, up 3.5%, and if we look at the downside, Monster Beverage Group, they were down 1.8%. Electronic Arts, we talked about yesterday, down another 1.5%. They are falling a bit at the moment, and that's just pushing them into bearish territory, although we're still flat on the relative. The Aussie market we talked about was strong. Syrah Resources quite often is in the laggard of the leaderboard. Yesterday they were actually up, starting to look like there might be a recovery, not sufficiently so on the trend. And the worst performing stock was Pilbara Minerals. They were down 4.8%. The Chinese market was fairly mixed. We saw that was down 0.5%, and just in India, the best performing was Yes Bank. Still trying to recover, but we see these counter trend moves where Yes performs, but on the whole the trend is pretty much down. And looking at the downside, we had Tata Motors down 3.9%, nearly 4%, and that's looking more bearish, coming back to test new lows. And here we see the life prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. Taking a look at the UK market, the best performer this morning, well, the worst performer is Micro Focus Group, down 3.9%. Ocado, having had a good day yesterday, are down nearly 3% this morning. And taking a look at the best performer, we've got EasyJet. They're up 1.4%, but the trend is still pretty much down. Taking a look at the 250, quite a bit of news in the 250 this morning. The worst performer at the moment is Page Group, down 12%. And we have seen here quite a move to the downside there. Superdry out with very bad results this morning. They're lurching lower, down 4.5%. Taking a look at the top performers, we've got Vivo Energy up 4.3%, not enough to really change the look of this chart, and Weatherspoons up 3%. This chart looking pretty strong indeed, breaking out to the upside, outperforming the Dow Jones index so far this year by 12%. Last of all, we take a look at the European indices. We've got SocGen, they're the best performer this morning. Banks coming back, having had a bad day yesterday. The charts look pretty terrible though for all these banks. ING Group, BNP Paribas, all looking much lower on the chart, but we are actually outperforming today. And if we look at the downside in Europe, we've got L'Oreal, quite a lot of the luxury brands, LMVH. The L'Oreal chart looks great, by the way, and so does LMVH. So interestingly, the stocks that are underperforming today are the ones that have got the best charts, and the ones that are doing well are counter trend moves. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.